All right, let's get straight into it. We're looking at a strategic assessment dated October 2nd, 2025, and its focus is a campaign targeting what the report calls the very artery of Russia's war effort, its energy infrastructure.
And the single most important number to come out of this analysis is this one, 38%. As of today, that is the amount of Russia's total oil refining capacity that is now offline. And we're not just talking about a temporary disruption here. The report frames this as a systemic degradation of a core state function. You know, what's really striking here is the velocity. That 38% figure, that's a jump of 3.4 percentage points in just 7 days. This shows the degradation isn't linear, it's actually accelerating. And that signals a rapidly escalating crisis for Moscow. So first, let's really establish the stakes. We're going to break down exactly why Russia's energy sector is so vulnerable, and maybe more importantly, what key technological shifts are making this entire campaign possible in the first place.
And here it is. This is the core vulnerability. A staggering 84% of all Russian refining capacity now lies within range of newly developed long-range systems. Think about that. Only a handful of facilities way out in the Far East are considered safe, which leaves Russia's entire economic heartland completely exposed. The main enabler identified in this report is a system called the FP5 Flamingo, and its specs are an absolute game changer. You've got a 3,000-kilometer range, which is huge, and a massive 1,150-kilogram warhead. This thing can reach deep into Russian territory, creating a dual problem for them. It not only holds their key assets at risk, but it also forces Russia to spread its already strained air defenses incredibly thin.
Okay, so this brings us to the campaign's acceleration. When you look at the timeline of recent events, it demonstrates a really clear escalation, not just in the intensity of these attacks, but in their sophistication as well. Just look at the last week of September alone. The pace was relentless. On the 25th, you have a naval drone strike on the Tuapse oil terminal. The very next day, a fire at the Refinery. Then on the 27th, a pivotal strike on a pumping station. By the 29th, Crimea is forced to impose formal fuel rationing. And then, on October 1st, a major fire breaks out at the Yaroslavl Refinery. This isn't random. It's a multi-pronged, continuous assault on the entire energy chain.
That strike on the Tyngovatovo Pumping Station marks a crucial strategic evolution. See, this was the first attack on what's called a midstream target. Refineries, well, they're finite points you can try to defend. But now, Russia is confronting the impossible task of protecting thousands of kilometers of exposed pipelines. And that's what the report calls an unsolvable defensive dilemma.
And this campaign is absolutely having real consequences inside Russia. We're seeing formal fuel rationing in Crimea, a 30-liter limit per customer. Shortages are now being reported in over 20 regions. But most significantly, Russia, a global energy superpower, is now seeking emergency fuel imports from Belarus and China. I mean, that's just a stunning reversal. This brings us to the core analytical framework of the report, this concept of a tipping point. The analysis models that once offline capacity crosses a certain threshold, the localized damage we're seeing will actually trigger a systemic, cascading failure across the entire Russian state. And here's the critical takeaway. Look at Russia's proximity to this predicted tipping point. With 38% of capacity already offline, the system is just 2 percentage points shy of that 40% threshold that the model identifies for systemic collapse. They're right on the edge. So how does this cascading collapse actually work? Well, it all begins with the physical strikes on refineries and pipelines. This creates a domestic fuel crisis, which in turn leads to falling fiscal revenue because Russia is forced to export cheap crude instead of its valuable refined products. And the final link in the chain is what this all means for the war: severely constrained military operations. Now, there's another powerful force multiplier at play here, which the report calls kinetic sanctions. The idea is that the physical destruction from a strike gets amplified by economic sanctions. Because so many of these refineries rely on complex Western components, Russia can't just import replacements. This stretches repair cycles from a matter of weeks into many, many months, turning what should be temporary damage into a persistent, long-term capability gap. So the report then moves into a forward-looking analysis. It models a scenario that could fundamentally change the campaign's impact, shifting it from what is essentially a battle of repair to one of reconstruction. And this slide really draws a stark contrast. The current drone strikes, with their relatively small warheads, cause component damage.
That leads to outages of, say, 3 to 6 months. A Tomahawk cruise missile, on the other hand, with its much larger warhead, causes catastrophic structural damage. The resulting outage isn't 3 to 6 months, it's 12 to 18 months or even more, because the facility has to be entirely reconstructed, not just repaired.
To quantify this difference, the analysis uses a metric they call Throughput-Days Offline, or TDO. It's a simple but really powerful calculation. You just take a facility's capacity and multiply it by the number of days it's offline. This gives us a concrete way to measure the total cumulative impact of the campaign.
So, what does the model project? It says that providing 500 Tomahawks would increase the campaign's total effectiveness when measured in TDO by a staggering 46.3%. That represents a truly dramatic escalation of the strategic impact on Russia's energy system. Based on all this analysis, the report makes several policy recommendations. It advises a concentrated targeting strategy, focusing strikes on the most complex and high-value units, like crude distillation units, CDUs, and hydrocrackers. These are the core components for producing valuable fuels. This approach is specifically designed to fully exploit that kinetic sanctions synergy, maximizing outage times, while, of course, carefully managing escalation risks. And that brings us to our final question. The strategy that's detailed in this assessment, it's not just about causing more damage. It's about fundamentally shifting the nature of this conflict, from a contest of temporary repair to one of long-term systemic reconstruction. The analysis is clear on the potential impact. So the question it leaves us with is this: what are the full strategic consequences of making that shift a reality?